Hey friends, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. Welcome back to your strategy session with just 8 weeks left to go in your AFL fantasy and SuperCoach season. It's getting close to the final few weeks and rounds before league finals, and ultimately also for those that play rankings. Well, so much can happen over these next couple of weeks. But on this strategy session, we want to talk about going unique versus protecting your lead. We want to talk about width of premiums versus the depth and height of the quality of premiums. We've got to talk too about if you've moved your focus over the last couple of weeks. And by that, I mean, you've realized your ranking goal isn't going to get you from where you want to be. You're now turning attentions to league, whether it be to beat mates, get a little bit of cash back, whatever it actually is. And then I want to give you some last minute advice to help you to target the right trades over the next couple of weeks, because boy, oh boy, you could either set yourself up for success or really kind of handcuff yourself to some poor historical past if you're not careful. Hey, running the strategy pod solo this week. It'll be a little bit shorter, a little bit sharper, but don't you worry, it'll still be jam-packed full of hopefully some good advice that's going to help you navigate wherever you find yourself sitting in this perspective. You're at this point in time in the season, and you've probably got one of two thought processes, especially if you're in a contending place. Now, that contending place isn't in isolation for just those that are contending from a ranks perspective, but also for those in a league. And ranks on that, we've got a pretty good indication now of where we are. But once we depart this week, once we get out of the first week of multi-buys, we'll probably have the truest and the most reliable data set we've had all year about exactly where our teams are at. Some teams have just sideways through the buys, especially in AFL fantasy, and maybe not have built up their team value to the perspective that they need to, or have just been sideways again and kind of running a team approach of premiums and not actually building around. That might be an okay philosophy that's got you through, while others have played a little bit more depth in how they've gone and selected and now rolling it out. And then there's, of course, the variables where you've got rookies outperforming premiums. Hello, if you put McCarthy on field over a Mills, now I know it was best 18 last week, but run that indulgence, it's a 30-point turnaround. That's normally not what you expect through there. You've got two ideologies of how you can go about your upgrades and trades right now. You can choose to protect, or you can choose to separate. Both ideologies work, but here is what I'll say. Either those that are protecting a lead, and what I mean by protecting a lead is I mean you're going to trade into the player that is most likely to hurt you from a rankings perspective that others in the top 100 in AFL fantasy, the top 100 in Dream Team, or top 1% in SuperCoach. We thankfully get that level of easy visibility and data. You can choose to just go, all right, that's the player with the ceiling, with the fixture, with the role that's the most likely to take the opportunity to win away from me. Can and should you trade into that? Yeah, absolutely you can, because if you're doing that, you've clearly made separation somewhere else in your side. Let's use a player for the namesake of the illustration. If it's a Nasiah Wanganeen-Millerer who has, after this week, an outstanding run home, and if you don't have Naz over the final probably 6 of the next 8 weeks, if you use DVP as the guide, it's looking really potentially worrisome if you are going against Nasiah Wanganeen-Millerer. Now, he's not cheap. It is not a value buy, and understand we'll get to the talking about whether you go for the best of the best versus whether you go for some width in your side in a moment. But if that's the guy that's going to hurt you, I know someone will go, yeah, you've got to get it to protect, but you've already created some separation elsewhere in your side. So I think that's the important thing is, can you negate? Absolutely. But that's a very, probably defending the lead mentality. And there's not too many coaches across all the formats that right now probably get to say they're in that defending the lead mentality. Rather, the reason someone might choose to trade into him is not a defending the lead mentality, is I'm trading into an Isaiah Wanganeen-Milera because he's got the best fixture, he's the best performer, and I don't have him, and I want him. And now the fact that it takes away the unique advantage from somebody that's ahead of me, that's a different story. Defending the lead is one thing. Then making moves to limit the person who's leading with roles is a whole nother thing. And then there's the last approach, which is deliberately creating separation by fading a player that is popularly in ownership in that top percentage and going and getting somebody else. Again, using the defense versus position analysis to help you to see, okay, who's got the right role, who's got that right price point for me, and who's got the fixture and a set of games that is coming up that's going to give me the best maximum opportunity for impact. Again, coming back to Naz, he ticks all those boxes for you outside of value. And I'm very, very comfortable with it. So I think you've got to, first thing is look at where is my team, and if I'm going for winning cash overall in Dream Team and SuperCoach, I'm going for the car, or to get myself a hat. By the way, you can get yourself a Coaches Panel hat at our store. The link is in the description of this episode. You can choose to play that protective defensive mechanism. And I think it's a perfectly viable thing as long as you know that is actually being offset by the uniqueness you've got somewhere else. If you don't have something that separates you from the pack, you're never going to separate from the pack. And so it might not be in your defensive line. It might not be in your forward line, but you should and do need something that creates separation from you. Otherwise, you cannot catch up on those that are ahead of you. It doesn't mean you can keep the gap that is there from those that are ahead of you. So, friend, if you're competing for a rank as high as you possibly can, this is where you start to use those ownership data elements across available lines. Like Hef from the Keeper League podcast as a star puts out that top 100 ownership really visibly easy for you on X. He makes it super easy. Subscribe to the gold and assistant coach features on Dream Team and SuperCoach. They give you the top 1%. That gives you as good as an indication of who's owned in that top group. I'm a big fan of making sure you have multiple players that are creating separation from you. I'm a massive fan of it. If you just think, I'll keep trading in the guys that everybody else has and protecting that lead out and protecting and negating that, I don't have a problem with that in principle. But if you want to win it all, somewhere in your team, you need a player with ceiling capacity, and that's what you've got to be looking for. A player that's got absolute ceiling capacity that is going to create some separation for you. Now, the good news is you don't have to go against a player like an Isaiah Wanganeen-Milera to do that. Our ruck line and our forward lines, let alone our midfield, all three of those lines feel like we're going to get unbelievable separation right now and some uniqueness in selection. Because when we look at the defense, it feels a bit more clinical, cut and dry about the type of players that we would want to see from now to the end of the year in our team. We'd all want to have an Isaiah Wanganeen-Milera. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. We'd all want to have, if you want to, I'm playing Sing Mick Martin, by the way, in the forward groupage. We'd want a Lockie Ash if we could get into it. We want a Max Holmes if we could get into it. The fixture would suggest that Jack Sinclair is right in the mix of that. Then you got Whitfield when he comes back from his concussion. Zorko's right in the mix of that. And now there are others that are in around that mark, but it's not, we're not talking about 15 players that could, not just for the year to date, but for the remainder of the year, be top elite line. Whereas in the forward line, once we get out of Kennedy, Jackson, Martin, Bailey Smith, it's opening up a little bit. Like Petrarca's no certainty in AFL fantasy. Warner, a little bit more maybe certainty based on fixture in SuperCoach, but maybe not so much in AFL fantasy. McRae is not in anywhere near as many teams as he once was and has got an unbelievable 4 or 5 weeks to end the year. Horne-Francis was the guy everybody was anticipating would pop. And now we're about to get him, for those that don't, an unbelievable bargain in a fortnight's time. So there's so much that can converge and diverge for us over the next couple of weeks. What I would say to you is this, friend, is if you're in the space of contending, do the work. Do the work to look at what your team is looking like, what the fixture is looking like, and then what those in contention around you as best you can see based on ownership percentages. Who are the players that are going to hurt you? Who are the players you have that could hurt them? And with the trades you have available in the limited trades formats, or with the 2 per week in AFL fantasy, map out your cadence of what this next 8 weeks is going to look like. It's not many weeks to create separation, because in AFL fantasy, anything more than 50 to 70 points is hard to chase. Why? Because once somebody's in that top 50 to 100 at this point in time of the season, it's really hard to dislodge them, because they've got the same amount of trades available to them this week, and they can protect and defend and protect and defend. They can see the same fixture data that you do. They can make that adjustment and maneuvering too. And so anything more than 50 to 70 points per week is hard to make up. It's doable. It's hard to make up. I think it's a little wider in SuperCoach and Dream Team, where the limited trades start to come into a factor. You have a player that drops out of a score with the 23 on field with the addition of the flex in 2025. And so it does start to create a little bit more variance for us. And that's where I'm a huge fan of that rule that has been brought into the game. And so do the work, have a look at it. And then my encouragement to you is be bold and absolutely go for the win. It is much better, in my opinion, again, you can play the game the way you like, but the way I like to play SuperCoach AFL Fantasy is if and when I'm in a contention space to win, which is in top couple of hundred ranks across SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy and inside the top 100 in Dream Team, you're a real life chance to be able to make up that 50 to 100 odd points per round. If that's the case, be aggressive and be prepared to slide your rank a little bit, because that's what you've got to put on the line to be able to win it, rather than just coast with the predictable safe move, Because if you do that, yeah, you'll hold shape of where you are. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you won't win it. So the question I would have for you is, are you playing this to win, or are you playing this to get a quote unquote respectable rank? Politely, I'd propose to you that you're playing to win, because your rank, what does it really matter in the end? Unless you win, what does it really matter to you? Yeah, you might get a hat. Okay, got some AFL fantasy hats. Great. I've got a top 100. Great. Awesome. Fantastic. Hey, in 12 months' time, you can have an absolutely horrific run of injuries, miss the odd lockout here and there, make a bad captain call, and all of a sudden just 7 or 8 variables, and all of a sudden you ranked 10,000. You any worse of a coach? No, just a couple of variables is all it takes to go from in contention to just missing, from just missing to way out of it. There's so many good people playing these fantasy sports games at the moment. It is harder than ever before to hold your rank and form. The good news is there's more information, support, content out there to be able to help you with that. But that would be my advice for you. If you're in a position to contend and genuinely win, like within 50 to 100 points from the overarching leader, okay, now you got to get to work. See what's unique to you. See where your opportunity to attack is. See where you need to defend your position, neutralize their opportunity to get you, and then what you need to do to be big and bold and brave. Be prepared to slide a couple of thousand ranks for the opportunity to win it all. And there's 2 philosophies of how you want to go about doing it. And look, it's probably more to a degree a SuperCoach philosophy at first, but I think there's some mentality around it from an AFL fantasy. And I'm talking about, do you want the best of the best premiums and as a result have minimal depth in your side? Or do you want to have a little bit more width about the options and have for SuperCoach, a 23rd, 24th, 25th premium, or in AFL fantasy, a 23rd premium? It's a good question. I think both philosophies can work for themselves. But in SuperCoach, you're a little bit limited by the number of trades you've got left. Most teams out of this week should have a team of quote unquote premiums. And I'm using that term maybe a little bit generously. Let me rephrase that. Players that you would be content to have in your side for the end of the year. Not excited about, so players like a Mills maybe, or a Chera, or gosh, even a Rankin. You might not be like, yes, I've got him on the field, but you're like, look, it's better than a rookie. Maybe not a McCarthy rookie, but better than a rookie. If you sit in that space and have that opportunity through there, my encouragement for you is to go, what do you want to build? And again, in a limited trades format, it does make it a little bit more challenging, because if you've only got, again, out of this week, 3-4 trades left, every trade has unbelievable value to you, because there's the one trade this week for the 10 points per game. Let's say you're looking at upgrading a Chera to a what's a player that someone in SuperCoach might be looking to do. You might be looking to pivot over to an Isaac Heaney. You might be looking to pivot over to a Jordan Dawson or a Caleb Sarong, whatever it is. The player doesn't really matter. But let's say it's a 15 points per game upgrade on average. Well, is the trade this week, okay, 120 odd points is the difference you believe that's going to make for the next 8 rounds. Okay. Now, is that trade more valuable to you now, or will it be more valuable to you in 4 weeks' time when a player goes in for off-season surgery, when a player has a role change that all of a sudden you want to pop and get on, when that ruckman is no longer in the form of his life, or whatever it actually is. And now all of a sudden you don't have to play your rookie as coverage. It's no longer Archer May coming on. It's no longer a Ted Closey or a Manny Liddy that's coming on to protect that premium who's having the week off for being rested and ripe for finals or going in for end of season surgery. Well, now, is that better there? Because it could be a 50, 60 point turnaround for that 1, 2, 3 weeks, every single week, and all of a sudden you're there. And so my encouragement would be in the more limited trade formats is don't get so far ahead of yourself that you don't leave yourself an opportunity to defend and protect with a trade, because every trade's got some value. I'm closer of the belief in SuperCoach and Dream Team that a greater width of options to choose from, where you can choose matchups, opponents, roles, and rotate players through, is of a higher benefit to have more width of options in my team, rather than ensuring I sacrifice width to get the top end guy. And then should I ever get exposed, I'm now running the Liddy type. I'm running the Archer May type on field. Yes, we're protected with flex. I understand that. But I'm saying giving yourself the best opportunity to have the most premium-esque scorers on field, I would encourage coaches. And again, it's the first year. We'll see exactly what's right. But I'm of the belief right now, while we want the best scoring options available to us, I won't sacrifice one spot of coverage, of good quality coverage. Late outs can come. You need that depth. Yes, you've got the player that falls out, but you want to protect that for the odd poor score that comes and not force it in that you're stuck there. I would rather build a little bit more depth and get a McKercher type at, or a Mills type at flex, just using names as illustrations, rather than having the McCarthy there, so that I can protect myself and not have to play Buslinger's score should he ever come back and play, if you understand what I mean. In AFL fantasy, it's a little bit different, but it's still a sentiment to consider is, do you have that depth of coverage that's there? I'd always like to have that, but when you get into this, in AFL fantasy especially, you get into that space where loops are a little harder to pull off for some places. You don't have as many mid loops that you can do. You don't have that score that drops off in flex, all that kind of stuff. I'm still a bit more of a fan of get that scoring on field and get reasonable coverage. in AFL fantasy, I'm a little bit more open to that because you've got the moves every single week, whereas SuperCoach, you don't have that variance. Everyone plays it differently, and that's okay. But I'd probably say go for a bit more width in options in SuperCoach and get a little bit more height in AFL fantasy. That's how I'd go for it. Hey, last two things I want to share with you before we wrap up the podcast. A lot of people, Patreons, people get in touch with us across social media. And by the way, you can follow us on socials and get in touch with us on Patreon with all the details in the description of this episode, have asked us this question. What do I do and how do I change my focus from the rankings realization that the year is not going to plan and I'm not going to get top 100 finish, top 1,000 finish, win the prize, whatever it is. And I'm now diverging away to a league focus, whether it be to win back some cash in a league against some mates, or whether it be just some bragging rights over some friends or some people at work. What's the ideology focus? Well, predominantly, it's pretty simple. Where we talk about in rankings where you're playing the percentages of who's owned what, where, and when, and how, you're now turning that focus to your opponents in your league. And it's actually much easier to see because based on where your league sits right now with when you start finals, when you don't, you can start to rule out certain teams that are coming up against you about what they could do in finals. So you can start to say, okay, this player, this coach has Nazaya Wanganeen-Miller. Again, I'm using him as a constant illustrative point rather than trying to over-yoke his importance to you more so than anything else. But if you're getting convicted, that's fine. And so, okay, he's got it, but he's not going to make finals. So that's not going to hurt me should I come up against that matchup in round 21 or in round 22. Well, this guy has that guy, and I'm probably a chance to do that. And so you start to navigate that. And it also can inform the type of trades or non-trades that you make. For example, in SuperCoach, you might be coming up against an opponent that historically you're like, oh, that would be the prime spot to get this guy, and I should go and get it, but I've only got 3 or 4 trades left, and it's going to be more critical to me in a critical matchup. I'm already 300-400 points projected ahead. They don't have the depth. They don't have that captaincy option. They don't have this. All right, I'm going to win. I can hold that trade. I can protect him as an illustration. Oh, I'm a Lockie Whitfield owner. He's going to miss this week. This isn't great. Well, hang on a second. He's already playing McCarthy on field at his D6. He's my D7. I can slide him on. I don't have to make that trade of a Whitfield out. I can be a bit more cautious because I know I'm safe in that matchup. I think and I'm confident I'm going to win. I'm okay. Or the outcome of this match doesn't determine or change my ranking in the ladder position. So I'm fine with that. All of those things start to come into a consideration is you're now playing against your opponents and where they are and what they've got left, as opposed to this broader, unknown, unnamed percentage pack. And so you're starting to focus in on who your opponents are over the next month to get to finals. What do you need to do to qualify? What trades, what players, what moves do you need to make? Make those moves. And then once you're there, then you can just start to play those matchups as you need to. Trades are then only used when you need to get that victory, when you need to get that movement, rather than just using depth if the outcome doesn't matter in that specific week. And so that's how I would make that move. And that's how I would go about changing my focus. So move from the grander percentage to the consideration of who you're playing week in, week out, and map out as best you can. All right, what are they doing? Where are they? Who are my warning signals? And what do I need to stop against that? Hey, one last thing for you before we wrap up this week's strategy session, and really it's a strategy pep talk more than anything else, is can I encourage you to do one thing before the round starts? And the reason I think it's going to help you is it will break some flawed mindsets you might just have rattling around in the back of your head for these final 8 weeks of the year. Because even the best of coach can make this very, very understandable mistake where they look at where the gaps of players are in their team and they either fall in love with a name or they fall in love with an average of the season to date and they trade into that player as a result. Rather, what I'd encourage you to do is treat this week, now that we're out of the buys, as if 2025 was just 8 weeks. Who would be in your best 22 or best 23 for SuperCoach? Who would be in your best 6 defenders, your best 8 mids, the top 2 rucks, your best 6 forwards? Who, based on what you believe, not just based on historical pedigree of, well, they've averaged 110 to date this year, Jordan Dawson in fantasy, therefore they will. Now, he might, but is the fixture there? Is the role there? Is the opportunity still there? Or is it not? Don't just fall back into the history of they've already done it for 15, 16 weeks this year. Therefore, it will unfold again. So, friend, can I encourage you to put in a little bit of work and use some of the DFS Australia data that sits out there to build for yourself your optimum best 22 for the rest of 2025. Go out there and just map it out, and it will then help you to go, oh, this player is good because of these matchups and this run. And all of a sudden, it can certainly open up to you in AFL fantasy who's missing from your team that you really don't want to get caught out without. While in SuperCoach, if and when you choose to pull that trade trigger or dream team, you've at least identified, if cash is not a problem, who you can go and get. So what I'll do for you is, I'll tell you who I think are the best options in AFL fantasy from now to the end of the year. You might disagree, and that's perfectly fine. But this is the example of going, okay, these are the guys I think are the best. Who don't I have? What do I need to do? Let me tell you who are my best defenders for the rest of the year. In no particular order. These would be my top 6. Nazaya Wanganeen-Millera, Holmes, Ash, Whitfield, even without, well, he's missing a game, but I think he's still going to be the highest averaging, and you can jump back into him. Whitfield, Rosie, and Dale. Those are the guys that I think over the back end of the year are going to have the highest averages for the rest of 2025. So my question is, which of these guys don't you have? And then drill down into, well, who's the right one? Is Rosie just a legacy pick? Maybe a little bit more. Well, hang on, where's Zorko? Well, where could that not work? Well, why Ash over Zorko? Have you looked at this unbelievable run for halfback, wings, and kick-in options for the Giants? It's pretty gravy. Okay, well, now that starts to change who you might go. So that would be an illustration of what it looks like. You might be running, and again, for AFL fantasy, you might be running a Cherry and a Gawn right now, or a Cherry and a Marshall. Who do you think are the best options to run for the end of the year? Is it English? I think Grundy has to be in that conversation. And so too does Marshall. I think this could be one of the great lines of separation that we see, because genuine case, it is not a clear top 2 anymore. Over the last 8 weeks, it's really opened up. I think that's a great thing for us. And so we'll see a bunch of different deviation, because averages would say it's probably Gawn, probably Cherry. I know Grundy's in unbelievable form at the moment. Is it a Grundy Gawn? Is it a Grundy and Cherry? Is it a Grundy and an English? Is it a Marshall and a Gawn? I think it's a lot of different people are going to have a different combination. Let me tell you who my top 8 mids are from now to the end of the year. And one of them's got a giant, like a real giant asterisk on it. Brayshaw, Caldwell, Dawson, Dacos, Green, Bontempelli, Goulden, and I still think Zach Merritt with that fixture. And now that Ridley and Reed are back, and to a lesser extent Sardell Hawley, I think he goes back in the midfield, especially with Parrish injured. So I'd put him in the mix. That's my bold call, right? Remember, we talked right at the top of the podcast. If you want to win it, you've got to have something that separates you. A week ago, we were trading out of Merritt. Maybe he's the guy. And then for the forwards, Smith, Martin, Jackson, Kennedy. I don't think anyone would argue in AFL fantasy they're the best 4 forwards available on form and on projected output. And then I'll give you 2. McRae, just quietly, the last 5 weeks for inside mid matchups for St Kilda are awesome. If this DVP holds, and if it does, you want your hands on that. And then Geelong have an awesome run home. Like, they've got Richmond twice who are just getting by. They've got a couple of other really nice favourable matchups. I could see Myers feasting. To me, again, another bolder call. Some might look at a Rankin could get there, or a cheaper Horn Francis, or a Warner, or a Petrarca. That's the beauty of this exercise I'm trying to get you to do, is look at it. Who is it? Not just based on the history of what they've done this year, using what you know about their role, about what the team is doing, what DVP of who they're coming up against is, and over a period of time, build it out. Then attack off the back of that. So go and make yourself a best 22 across the lines. It's more limited in SuperCoach because you don't have the volume of trades. So too in Dream Team. But if you do that exercise and you get in a position to want to be able to trade, know who and when it is. Oh, I want McRae for that period of time. Oh, I want to get Myers at that point of time. Oh, I want to make sure I've got Dacos from here. Otherwise, do that work so that when you need to trade in SuperCoach and Dream Team, you can. And in AFL Fantasy, you're maximizing the upgrade, or you're maximizing the premium in, premium out approach to be able to get the best possible chance to have a good score. Hey friends, I hope you've enjoyed the strategy pep talk. I'm wishing you well. I'm glad to see the back of the buys. I am not a fan of it for a number of different reasons. The main one being, I just like the pain of letting it roll. Let us indulge in it. What a great challenge to just let the squads go. But I'm pretty confident as long as there's mid-season buys, the best 18 is going to stay. I hope you did navigate them well. I hope your team is in a stronger position than what it was coming into it. Out of it, it's looking good. Please get in touch with us across social media. We're here to help. You can reach us there with all the details in the description of this episode. If you haven't followed us on YouTube yet and subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so. If you're yet to give a 5-star rating on the podcast platform you're listening to, my friend, it is a small, simple task, but it makes a big impact for us. And then, of course, if you want to join our Patreon or get your hands on some Coaches Panel merch, all the details for those are found alongside everything else in the description of this episode. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Good luck this week. I hope it is kind to you. We'll be back real soon with another strategy session and some more trade targets to get you through the end of your 2025 season.